Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Georgetown Tea House. Tonight, we're going into episode 3 of our exploration of the West Indian family tree. With me this evening, we have at the bottom of the screen Mr. Marty Lindie, and at the top, right next to me, is Jacqueline Smartt. For those of you who would have been, following us thus far, you would have met them, talking about their family's history. So tonight, we're going to be a little more informal, a little more chatty. We want to, exchange some names, learn some more stuff, and maybe even see if Jackie and Morty are actually family. You know how this thing goes. You never know. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Please don't forget, like, share, and if you're on YouTube, do subscribe. All right. Thanks for all who've joined us already. We have a few folks. Marty and Jackie, welcome to the live. All right.
Lovely to be here.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Jackie, your book that you're currently writing on your family tree, does it have a working title as yet?
Yeah.
What was the title?
In the footsteps of my ancestors.
Great. Good. All right. Now, cousin, have either of you been in that position where you would have learned that someone you went to school with, someone from your village or town, or your job, was actually a cousin, and you didn't quite know it? Have you encountered that kind of situation, either of you?
I have. I mean, growing up in Kukwani is a fairly small place, and most of our roots is from the Berbice River. So there's a lot of folks that grew up in Kukwani that came from the Berbice River, and I don't think I realized until here in the States. A close friend of mine and folks in Kukwani that played football, right, soccer, together with and went to school with Eon LaRose, that we call him Zico.
Okay.
He is actually a distant cousin of mine that I did not discover until adult age, right? I mean, you might have had some indication, but I was actually able to trace it back on my dad's side through the Lindies, like my dad's grandfather's sister, who was a Lindie that married a Denhart that and sort of down that lineage found out that yes, he's actually a cousin of mine. So yes.
Okay.
Happened to my sister, actually.
Okay.
She used to go to a friend of hers. Their family had a restaurant, and she would go to this restaurant quite frequently. And this gentleman there would keep telling her, "Your name's Smartt. Use me cousin, use me cousin." And she'd be like, "Please stop." And he would every time. "All right, next time you go home, go and tell your father who's Keith Ferreira." So she went home and she said that, and he went, "Oh yeah, that's your cousin."
Just like that, right? Yeah. What happened with me? Things a little over 2 weeks ago. Now my wife, she has a friend who's married to one of her cousins, right? And everybody's known each other for a while, and my wife knew his wife from since she was a teacher back in Guyana. When I just call her first name Shonda. So 2 weeks ago, Shonda calls me, "Andy, we cousins." No, I'm one of those individuals that don't get too excited with this. Hey, this person is your cousin, the person is your cousin thing. But for you who would have gone through this kind of research, starting with you, Jackie, how do you typically respond to a moment like that? Or would you advise somebody, experiencing a moment like that?
Well, it's sort of, as a Guyanese person growing up, you ever go to anybody else's house or go to somebody new, the first thing they do when they meet you is, "So who's your father? So who's your mother? And wait, now your grandfather was so and so." And I've sort of turned into those people.
Okay.
When people start saying, "I might be your cousin," and I'd be like, "Okay, so what's your father's name? And then what's your mother's name? And how do we connect?" And so you have to sort of do the same traditional way of finding out, just ask questions.
Yeah. Right. What's your take on it, Morty?
Look, it's the same thing. I'm the same way. I am constantly now, when I'm meeting relatives, it's an extra antenna, right? Listening for names, listening for, where they're from, and sort of not being too intrusive at time, but maybe taking mental notes of names they may mention and things like that. So it's a constant research. But I do want to go back to when you mentioned if we meet people that we realize is that we didn't know was a cousin but we grew up with. One of the things that I have done is, even though you may know someone was your cousin, you really didn't know, is it first cousin, second cousin, or where in the lineage.
Right.
I have learned.
Cousin.
Yeah, I have done a lot of that and was able to clarify a lot of how you are related, even though you may know you're related, right? So through these efforts and work and just talking to people, been able to clarify a lot of that, not only for myself but even for family members that we'll look at those linkage and say, okay, now that makes sense, or okay, now I understand this, right? So yeah.
Have you also encountered the people who they think they're related? They might be certain that they're related, but they don't really know the correct names of the family members who they might be related to you through?
There's been a few of that, yes. You always find different, so many different variations of things, that yes, you can know you're related. And one of the reasons for that too is sometimes, especially if the relationship is through a maternal side, that you end up losing that, because a lot of people will end up knowing family member through, at least in the English system, right, knowing your family member through your paternal side, right, because of the last name that passed down. But my wife, whose heritage is of part Portuguese, the way they did things was totally different. You can't rely on last name, because names sometimes interchange, from generation to generation. You may have last name becoming someone's first name, or sometimes there's name associated with region. So there's a lot of that you end up, you can't always rely on the traditional hey, what's your name? What's your dad's name and things like that. So yeah.
I had some relatives come over who wanted to look at the family tree. So they knew that their great grandmother was related to my great great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
So they look at the family tree and they see her name and then they see the siblings. So their grandmother was one of the siblings. So the siblings' names are Justina, Josephine, and they're going through and they're looking. And they look at each other. This is a bunch of older folks now. And they're looking at each other like, so you think it's Jessica? You think it's Joseph? So I'm looking at them. I'm like, you don't know your grandmother's name, whatever. They're like, well, we only knew her as Yaya.
Yeah.
That would have happened a lot.
Right. If they had asked back then what the real name was, they would have been considered rude. So they never asked.
Yeah. That's the thing too. I mean, you'll find a lot of people that they just, know someone by, what we call, either a false name or just a, mama and things like that. Right. So I am discovering, folks on my mom's side, the Bender side, that, at her great grandfather level, had siblings that sort of moved from the Berbice River to New Amsterdam, and only through the DNA that I was able to say, okay, we're related now. How are we related? And it's it's a big search and things like that. But you find people, and you'll find a name, and they go, well, I knew this person as some call name as opposed to their official name. So that could sometimes throw you for a loop.
Okay, Robert Allen, one of our viewers, he's saying good evening, and he's asking, he's referring to that question, who are your parents? And he's saying that it's the question that would be asked when you brought someone new to the home. Have you ever had that experience, Marty? You bring a young lady to the home, and your mom or dad saying, asking them who's their parents?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a common thing, right? When I met my wife, Leola, at the time we were talking, when we were talking, I have an older uncle, and I mentioned him earlier in one of the previous podcasts, Uncle Lloyd. Uncle Lloyd grew up in the Berbice River, and of 7 days of the 7 days beliefs, and when he met Leola, whose last name is Withers, he right away started asking questions. It turned out that he actually knew her uncle, her father's brother, who was also big in the 7 Days Adventist Church, and actually advocate for that quite a bit around the Caribbean. Right. So those are things that happen, right? And you go back to hey, it's a small world, right? So but yes, I mean that happens a lot.
Okay, interesting. Now, Jackie, the surnames that Morty kind of popped up with, from Leps to Lindie, Bender, Patwa, are any of these surnames familiar to you, or would you have encountered any of these surnames as you did your research in your family's history?
The thing was, like, for example, when I went to Lancaster, Berbice, and I was able to get the birth certificates and the wedding information from the priest, the village priest, I didn't really look to see anybody else other than the names that I was familiar with. So from going to our family reunions, I looked for names that ended in Paul, Smartt, Bourne, Osborne, anything along those lines. As I saw them in the book, I took a picture all the way through. But anything that I wasn't familiar with, I didn't pay attention to. I'm sorry. I knew which names I needed to find, and that was it. Because I didn't know when I would next get a chance to do this, so it was me on the phone. Yeah.
All right. Alexis Fry is saying, my internet husband. Let me see that.
Who was a half sister?
Wow. My internet husband experienced that. Right, he took his then girlfriend to meet his mom. His mom asked what her dad's name was, and it was his half sister. Wow, we, we've had, I've heard of, I've heard of those kinds of situations, time and again. Right?
Yeah.
And Don J saying, I didn't know my uncle's real name until I was 12. Lord.
Well, I had a situation with that too in the family. So my uncle Joseph, who died in 2020, and I were the ones who were going around the place to get information. And Uncle Joseph, his one uncle that he knew, his name was Damon. As far as he knew, Uncle Damon. So I had put on the initial tree, Damon. And then another name kept popping up, Nathaniel. And I said, you have another uncle named Nathaniel? He said, no, we have the one uncle, Uncle Damon. So we went to Guyana in 2009 and did some research and stuff. And then when we went back in 2010, one of his nieces said, you want to meet Damon's children? Now, at this point, Uncle Joseph was 89. So I didn't think that he had any first cousins still around. We go and we meet the oldest of the ones who were still around. And I said, so I'm just confirming. So your dad's name was Damon? And he was very upset because his father's name was Josiah Edward.
Wow.
Nothing close to Damon, but he grew up his whole life knowing him as Damon.
Yeah. That happens. That happens so often in our thing. On the subject of false name, as we call it in GT. You said your dad's first name was German. False name was German, right, Marty?
Yes.
Was that in reference that he had something Germanic about him? Where did that name come from?
I don't know if I have a definitive story about it, and he might be listening and probably laughing. My mom would say, my mom Esther Bender Grimman would say, he called himself that because of his complexion. But my dad was known for getting false name in Kokwani, and the reason I know so much is every false name that he probably acquired for whatever reason, it somehow fell back on me, right? I was I'm the eldest son. I am the middle child of 7, but I am the eldest son. So whenever something happens to him, it I never got the name German, but there was other name that just developed based on things that happened, occurrence, and it would, I've got a friend today, Winston Clark, call him Boogs. To this day, anytime he sees me, he calls me Pearson because of an incident that happened in Kokwani where this con man came up to Kokwani and he conned everybody, and his name was Pearson. And somehow, my dad got the name, and the stories varies tremendously as to what Pearson really did. But to this day, if Boogs would see me, Pearson. But that's Kokwani though. Like I said before, Kokwani, everybody's got a false name, right? So that's
Marcel is wondering if they didn't call you Young German at some point. Sometimes they would do that.
No, I don't ever recall people calling me Young German. I probably, like I said, maybe everything else, but not the German name.
Right. Now, I mentioned this in one of the previous podcasts. We would have said, you look at Jackie, you look at Morty. They're obviously of mixed heritage. And I know of someone whose mother is Portuguese, as in pure Portuguese. Her father Afro-Guyanese. You look at her, there's no Portuguese there at all, right? Now, I'm wondering, as Guyanese, as people with a passionate feeling for family, how have you each dealt with that factor of being, mixed blood, and sometimes people kind of, if you point out somebody and that person seems to be so distinctly different from you, they might be asking, you sure you all this family? How have you all dealt with that as have you moved along?
It was never really a factor. I mean, it was, as long as you grew up, this is the face and this is how your household looked. So it wasn't something to us, but to other people sometimes, they might say, oh, my hair might be a little different texture from my other sister's hair or something like that. Yeah, I'll show you related. Or it's like, can you look at the faces? It's the same face. I mean, it within the household, we were just, whoever we were, and it didn't really matter.
Right. What about you, Marty?
Well, I think within our household, if you see, my other 6 siblings, 3 girls, and 2 boys, the boys tend to be more of darker complexion towards my mom, and the girls are of lighter complexion, more towards my dad. But no issue there. But I must say though, growing up part in Guyana and Kokwani, and then transition into the States, you did notice, you did sort of experience certain things. I know, for instance, back home, I wouldn't call myself, black home, right? I would probably say, mix, not Douglas, but sometimes you sort of fall into that category. And then when you transition to the States, what do you do, right? I mean, at that point, you are then consider black. So there was that period in your life where you had to deal with, with that, that identity, right? Where you've got to identify yourself as something. And outside of that, I think, where we moved to in the States, in Paterson, New Jersey, it was a big, Black Hispanic type community. When I would go to school, a lot of people will think of me of Hispanic, and they will start talking,
yeah, okay.
And when I say no, I'm not, they go, oh, you look like a Dominican or something like that, right? So they sort of pigeonhole me within that area. But I mean, those were just general things, and just culturally that, you transition from one place to another, you deal with these things.
I mean, my parents went to college in England, and they both experienced racism there. But the one thing, it was, from them and from the grandparents and everybody else in the family, the color didn't really matter. It was like, you can achieve and do whatever it is that you need to do without having anybody else putting what they think onto you. So we were sort of always taught to be positive and to be very confident in ourselves. It didn't matter what anybody else thought. So I remember when I was working on Wall Street, nobody could mess with me. So after a while, I said, well, I grew up and my parents always taught me to be very confident. They went, yeah, we know.
So my
an opinion, you would hear it.
My sister's reminding me on the chat that we were called buck people where we were. So, and I know that could, that term, you've got to be careful with it, right? So
I know, because we did use it in a derogatory manner in
Yes, you did, but and I think also there were, it didn't always associate with your complexion. It depends on where you're from too, right? Most people that came from the Berbice River, right, from that side, people would consider you, right? They would say, yes, you're buck because you're coming from the Berbice River, and that had nothing to do necessarily with your complexion. It was just where you were located. So you've got things like that, and then sometimes it would be based on complexion or appearance and things like that too.
The thing with the Smarts, it was sort of like they were very dark, and they wanted their sons to bring home dark-skinned women. They didn't want anybody who was mixed coming into the family. So when my granddad brought my Douglas grandmother along, they were not well received. But it was the proud to be black and to be dark black was part of the family's, that side of the family, from the Smartt side. And it didn't matter, you were you're going to be educated because it's a whole long line of educated people. So whatever you look like was, you whatever color, be proud of whom you are. Don't worry. Don't let anybody try to tell you anything different. You were not less than in front of anybody else. So that's sort of what's been drummed into our heads from we were little. So it didn't, other people could have opinions about, and sort of think, okay, because you're Black, you might not live up to this standard. We didn't give a rat's behind what anybody else thought.
Right.
We still achieved and went on and knew that we could do. And it didn't matter what you thought, it's what we thought of ourselves.
Yeah. But interestingly enough, too, is I don't know if I truly know the origin of the word buck, but I did come across it when I was reading the book Blackwater People. And that's probably the first time I saw it like officially mentioned. And in there, it was actually mentioned as a Scottish guy, and where they got the name from, I'm not sure, but was referring to the indigenous as Buckies, and somehow maybe from that Bucky terminology, maybe shortened to Buck. Right. Okay. So, but I think that's how it was referred to. And this was a book, that was written for someone that, came to Guyana, I think in the mid 1800s or so. So yeah, somewhere around there.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Robert Allen is saying Guyanese families are very closely intertwined, especially those who would have been born in Barbados and moved to Guyana in the 1800s. Now, you have Barbadian family, right, Jackie?
Yeah.
Right. What are the other surnames you would have encountered in Barbados outside of Smartt?
Actually, when I went to the archives in Barbados, so I knew. Remember, I told you that Nathaniel name kept popping up. So as far as Uncle Joseph knew, his father's name was Francis Kenyon Smartt, but I kept finding this name Nathaniel and seeing it in different. I'm saying, you sure you don't have another uncle named Nathaniel? You sure? Well, we get to Barbados, go to the archives, and his name was Francis Nathaniel Smartt. Kenyon was the nickname. Again, the nicknames get popped into things. And then we found out that he lived in an area in Barbados called the Glebe. So we went to the Glebe, and would you know it, there's a whole bunch of Smarts that look exactly like me still living in the Glebe.
Right.
So I didn't get, it was just fascinating to see people who I've never met before, and I'm meeting all these different Smarts, and they're Smarts with one T. So that was the other thing, because he left Barbados as a Smartt with one T, got to Guyana, and he met his wife, and he signed his marriage certificate with one T, and on all of his children's birth certificates, he added a T.
What could that additional T mean?
I have no idea. So I don't know if he wanted to separate from some other Smarts by differentiating, but
that's very interesting. And and why the letter T? Why he opted to double up on the T? Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, somebody's saying, somebody's bringing up the term. I'm sure you would have dealt a lot with that growing up, Marty.
The red Mantor?
Yeah, the red Mantor.
That's another cousin of mine that popped that out there. I get no easy break. Yes, red man. Like I was saying, my dad acquired a lot of names, and one of the names that he was called was forgive me, Dad, Dutty Red. Right?
Oh Lord.
Dutty Red. He had his appearance of him. I don't know, but he's a freckle man, and for whatever reason, he called him Dutty Red. There's all kind of stuff, but I'm sure he's laughing and he's going to give me a hard time later.
You're going to give me a hard time, right?
Yeah, yeah, but as far as names from my lineage, I don't have any direct names that came from other places, but I do have my cousins. For instance, the Boyles. My understanding is that that name may have come by way of, I think, think Barbados or even from Suriname or something like that. So and then through my research on the Bender side, and this is the extended one that lives in New Amsterdam that I recently made connection with. There are some guy by the name of Compton in the UK, and his mom married to Haynes, and that Haynes came from Barbados. So there is a, refer to them as the Haynes clan, right? But that's a recent discovery that I am recently starting to talk to them, but I don't have any direct names that came from one of the islands or so. Yeah.
Well, also my great grandfather, the one who came from India, his name was Pelagia, but then he changed it to somebody that he met, we're not sure where, to Gordon. His last name is Gordon.
Wow.
So on his wedding,
watch it there.
That's as far away from the
last name, not first, last name. So he on his indentureship papers it says Pelagia. On his wedding certificate it says Paul Gordon, formerly known as Pelagia.
Wow. A totally different identity. On the question of identity and nationality and all that. Now I know you define yourself as a Guyanese, Jackie, right? But Morty, tell me this. Now, Jackie, her mom is Jamaican. Her dad, Guyanese. She was born in England. How should we define such a person? What's her nationality in your mind, Morty?
Well,
if you had to write her story, how would you define her nationality?
It's a tough one, right? But I know through my kids also, right? They're proud to say, look, they're Guyanese, right? So I think it varies, right? There's some people that takes more pride in their roots and may very well want to identify themselves with being Guyanese if that's where their parents are from. But I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm indifferent as to what you would be considered. I would probably lean on you to say, well, how would you be considered? Because I don't want to put any label on anyone, but I'll be happy to identify you the way you want to be identified. But like I said, I know with my I shouldn't say my kids, but at least my girls. I've got twin girls, and they're more Guyanese than I am without ever going to Guyana. So it's amazing. So yeah, they've got the flags and they've got everything.
Today in my school, I teach, and in my school, these kids who are all born here, but they have Guyanese parentage, we were doing pagua. We were throwing the abrak, and everybody was getting all involved, and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And they even had a little Guyanese flag going and whatever else. And they've never been to Guyana.
I enjoy it when I see it. I mean, I like seeing that. So I think that's very nice when the kids are embracing their heritage and culture and things like that. So
definitely.
Awesome.
No, I know you both would like to see, more of us delve into our family trees. Now, ultimately, let's say we, hypothetically, we get 30-40% of Guyanese people to delve deeply into their family tree. Jackie, what do you think that would do for, based on your own experience, what can it do for us as a society if, more of us went into exploring our roots?
I think it's the nice thing with doing it is that it gives you a sense of who you are. It sort of brings more people together because most Guyanese people, they have some mixture in them from some angle somewhere. And they're usually proud to say, mix with, this one, my great-great-grandfather was Portuguese, or, the other one was Indian or whatever else. And it's like, you have all of these different pieces. When you do the research, it sort of makes it come to some kind of whole that sort of fills in little spaces. And I think it makes us more of a one instead of all the separate nonsense that sometimes happens.
Right, right. Your take, Marty?
No, I agree with that. And, you know, I don't know if you say, you know, if you put a percentage on the amount of Guyanese that doing it, it would be beneficial. But I would certainly say if you put a percentage on the family, you know, some main person within the family, like Jackie and myself, you know, that can sort of cover a wide range of the family. I think that will be great, right? From the family tree standpoint. I mean, for me, I mentioned, you know, I got involved with this here from my cousin Camille, that Camille Boyle, that invited me to Genie back in 2008, right? And at that point, I used to dibble and dab and do things in it, but once I got into Genie, it really took off from there. And then my other cousin from the Bender side, you know, have this tremendous tree that would be on the wall, right? And that was actually a big source of some of the information that I have now in Genie, was just sort of collaborating with them. Camille and I collaborated a lot. Sometimes we'll be on phone calls with some elderly folks, you know, doing those freeway calls and taking notes and grabbing as much as we can, and leaning on Leonard and Sharon, just trying to. But if you have a few point people within a family, I think that's great. So that's what I would encourage people to do.
Right, yeah, to identify those individuals with the information.
But you can't force it on people, though. I mean, there's people that just don't want anything to do with it and will walk away from it, and then there are people that enjoy it. So if you can find those interests, I think it'd be a great thing.
Yeah, and also sometimes though you have to find the people who are giving you the information. You have to hope that they are correct, because I also had an instance where one of the cousins was sort of the matriarch in her area, and one of the brothers died, and she swore up and down that she had his correct name. And then when I did the birth certificates and brought the information, the name on his tombstone is not his.
Wow. Wow.
And she was like, well, I could have swear I knew what his name was. And she remembered he was there when he was born. And yeah,
that's a good suck teeth. I hear one of them in a way. But that's why when I take information, look, I take it and I say, I'm going to take whatever you give me. And that's it, right? I'm not judging and things like that. But if I find records that indicate otherwise, I'll go with that. But I'll take whatever people give me for the time being until I can prove otherwise.
But you also had mentioned before, I do the same thing. I go to older people's homes. I have my phone. I take pictures of their pictures. If they have any information, I take pictures of that. So I end up being the chronicler in the family, because you never know when next you'll see some of these people. You get to meet them. You get whatever you can get from them, record them, because they have stories to tell. You just have to ask. And a lot of us sort of like, we still got this granny who's 82. Have you ever spoken with her? No, they never really sat down and asked any questions. I was intending to, and they always are intending to.
Yeah.
And then next thing, granny dies, and then it's like, we should have asked granny.
Yeah, you talk about pictures. One of my biggest regrets right now is to this day we can't seem to find a picture of my grandfather, my mom's dad, James Grimman. We know there's pictures out there. We've seen pictures. Like I saw a picture of him before I had this interest. And I cannot find it now, and it irks me that I can't find that representation. And my mom would say, well, he looks like that for us, and he looks like that for us. And but I want that picture. So if anybody's out there that might have a picture of Grandpa James Grimman, please do reach out to me.
Okay, that's Grandpa James Grimman.
Yes, Grandpa James Grimman. Yes, a long line of Grimmans. And that's another thing too. I mean, from Harelda, when we were talking, there was actually people in her lineage that I actually had in my tree as I'm trying to figure out Grimman, because Grimman is big from the Fort Nassau area in the Barbary Strip, but also very big on the coast, and a lot of names are similar. And there's Pitt that married to Grimman, and I actually had a lot of that in my tree as I'm trying to find a common connection, and still trying.
I was lucky in that one of my great aunts, she was the keeper of the family album, which I now have in my possession. And it had pictures of the great uncles and the great great grandmother and the great 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 grandmother in this album. So, I at least have my grandfather's grandmother's photograph in the family tree. And I did the tree with photographs, since I had all of these photographs, so that, other people, future generations, could see who looked like whom.
Yeah.
Jackie, I think Robert Allen is wondering if the two of you all are family. Say, Jackie, my grandmother's family, Smartt, is from Jamaica.
And my mother, who's from Jamaica, her last name is Goldburn. The Smartt is the guy in East Side.
so Robert, not in this case. Right? No family.
Sorry.
No. Now, Marty, in your own search, where would you say your drive and your passion for this kind of information come from? Are you a storyteller? Are you interested in history? Is it curiosity? Is it a desire to bring people together? What drives you in your peculiar path?
When you like something and you love something, you probably don't need to justify it.
Okay.
It's truly one of those feelings for me, and I keep telling people I don't know why I enjoy this so much, but yes, I think some of it is a sense of history. Some of it is a sense of some of the stories that you heard. Some of it is the fascination of, as I mentioned before in previous podcasts, on the Lindie side, I had, there were three Lindies three Lindie siblings that married three Leps. I had similar things. There's similar things on the Grimman side. I think on the Grimman side, there may have been like 4 Grimman that marry Benders. Not all sibling. I think maybe 2 siblings, marry, 2 Grimman siblings marry 2 Bender siblings, or 2 or 3. But they were Grimman that marry maybe a cousin of those siblings, right? That is a Bender. So I think like at my grandparents' level, there was like 4 of that, 4 Benders to 4 Grimman, and there are, as I mentioned, there were Benders to Patwa at my like my 3rd great grandparents level. So just seeing that and the web that was created, and a lot of times people may see these, and at face value they may think, oh, there's probably a lot of nefarious thing that happens there, right? But sometimes when you look at it, there's a few slippage here and there. Okay, that's going to happen. Everybody grew up in small villages and things like that. And the Barbary River, you could only go so far in a canoe or a pete or or a balahu or something, right? So you can
your choices were slim.
you sort of limited. So okay, let's take that take that for what it's worth. But when you look at it, and I am amazed sometimes that, there isn't anything wrong with what really happened. It's just people were in the similar small villages sometimes, and you may have stepped over line once in a while, but not nearly as bad as it appears or it could have been. So
or it could have been your god sister,
Yeah. I mean, there's things like that. Yeah.
The outside children became godchildren.
Gotcha. So your thing is the same, Jackie. Your drive, your motivation is just a love for what you do, or
Yeah, I mean, it's the stories are so fascinating. When you sort of talk to some of these people, you see them as these little nice little old people. Well, one of my great uncles said, a lot of these old people you see now used to be young devils. So when you hear the stories of what they used to do and what their lives were like, it is amazing. It's just so fascinating. So I love gathering the stories, putting it together. Yeah, making them work hard. Of course, they complain the whole time. You're a real school teacher. You got me working. I all know I retired. I don't know why I got me writing all this stuff down for you. Yeah, there you go. Keep going.
all right. So in upcoming podcasts, we will continue to follow Jackie's story and Morty's along with others. Both of these stories are evolving stories. Jackie, when is your book coming out? Do you have a date?
I'm just finishing it up. It should be before the end of the year.
Before the end of the year. All right. So we will definitely be looking out for that. On your end, Marty, sorry, you hope to write a book at some point?
I keep thinking about it, and people keep telling me to do it. I probably need a little bit of nudge. I am not that type of, of a person, but maybe I'll get there. But it is something that has been sort of twirling in the back that I probably need to do
And
something.
I'm
Not
369 pages in, so
well,
Wow.
I'm still taking my headlines, so I'm a little behind you, but maybe I'll catch up at some point. I am being encouraged quite a bit though, that I need to do something, but I
That you
probably
need
need
to
to do
do.
something.
All right. All right. Alexis Fryer is saying that she's particularly interested in the Fryer side of the family. So if anyone out there knows that last name Fryer, you got some, information, you could always let us know. All right.
And Alexa and I have been working on that recently. I recently actually connected with her through DNA. I mean, this DNA thing is just fascinating, guys. I mean, I am truly amazed by the science behind it, the
Behind it.
connection and things like that. So, we talked about family tree, but if I can encourage people, I know some people's a bit skeptical and hesitant about it, but if I can encourage people, is yes, do it. It's a nice thing to do. It helps you. It helps the family. It helps. It helps us. And I know people. Can I mention something here, Andy? Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
I know. For instance, people in Guyana. I know there are a few that are on here. They are a little bit of a disadvantage as far as getting things like that done. But if you reach out to Eureka Lab, something can be arranged to help that. And I mentioned this before, but I think that level of connection, absent the archival information, right, the DNA, the science connection, will really help us to move this along even quicker and faster. And I think it's pretty solid. I haven't seen anything to dispute things that I've found through the DNA
Sure.
testing.
Okay. One
did.
of yours, Billy Jones is asking, Billy Alexis Jones, she's asking, which DNA site did you use?
I use Ancestry, and the reason I use that, there's other people that will use 23andMe and Heritage and some other places. I think they're less expensive, but Ancestry is what I use and what I encourage people. They've got more of a sample in there, and I think sometimes if you're just patient with Ancestry, they do a lot of promotion sales around the holidays that you'll find it at a very, very reasonable one. But that's the one that I use. And the good thing about it, the reason too, is you can actually download your raw DNA from Ancestry and bring it down to a third-party place and then move it back up. For instance, my raw DNA is in Ancestry. I've got it on things like GEDmatch, and then I was able to upload it to Genie and upload it back to Heritage. So just from that one source, I'm able to multiply it across different sources for DNA matches.
I did both 23andMe and Ancestry.com. And basically, all of the information that I got from the ancestors, the relatives. So we are from Ghana, India, and Europe. So it worked out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at least it sort of made it concrete.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm seeing similar sort of makeup too on my ethnicity from Europe and in Africa and the indigenous folks also. So myself, I think I'm about 10% indigenous, maybe about 50% African, and then the rest is of European.
8% European, 16% Indian, and the rest African.
Okay. All right. So you heard that, folks.
Do it.
Do it.
Exactly. Don't
Don J, you
reach
popping
out.
in and popping out. What's going on? Please welcome aboard Don J. He has come just at the end when the bell is about to ring. You know about them people, right, Jackie?
You just run in.
When the bell's about to ring, they're now turn up.
I was tuned in, but I didn't want to interrupt the intimate setting. Y'all going with the noise in my background, you know. So
okay, cool.
Great
cool.
show, guys.
Good.
But,
Tell us about that uncle that you didn't learn his name until you were 12.
Yeah, so I got a similar story for my mom as well when I think about it, because my mom's name was Mommy, and like my cousins, like she raised out, like most of my cousins would come and spend a lot of time with us, and they would call her Auntie Lovey. Her name is Laverne, right? Mm-hmm. So I would want to call her Auntie Lovey too, but I can't call her Auntie Lovey. It's Mommy. Mommy is the name. You know, I learned her name way earlier than my uncle, but my uncle, I know him as Juggy. Everybody called him Juggy. So Uncle Juggy. I didn't know the man had a respectable name as Uncle, and then
Juggy from Kukwani by chance, is it? There was a Juggy in Kukwani.
I know Uncle Juggy me whole life. Then somebody said, well, your uncle stopped me on the corner. You's Lyndon nephew? Who's Lyndon? You mean Uncle Juggy? So that is what I know the man named Lyndon. I know he is Juggy. You know? And then my dad is from Berbice, and my mom is from Georgetown. And my mom also got family from Essequibo. So when I came over to New York City, my mom took me to a church, and the church happened to be the same pastor from South Rumville back in the days. And some people in the congregation come start asking me questions like, hey, I know you're Laverne's son, whatever. And I found my great-grandmother's first cousin at that church. So there's access to people that I had never met in Guyana, but it's my grandmother's first cousin. And all her generation is in the church as well. So all these people are now my cousins, and I'm getting to know these people, So I'm in a strange land, and then I meet strange family. Like family that are strangers, but you don't feel too strange because like somehow within the blood thing or whatever, you just come and just fit in like naturally with their kids, everybody. Like, I'm like a brother to her grandsons. And everybody at that house over there. So it's a dangerous thing in being Guyanese. And also my mom is related to Allens and Bowens, and the rumor is that all the Bowens are related. Yeah. And all the Bowens are related, and also the Allens. So it's
I know certain family names get that a lot. You get that on your end, Jackie, where if anybody say like all the Smarts got to be related?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, because you have the different versions of the Smarts. You have the Barticus Smarts, the Georgetown, the Lancaster Berbice Smarts, and then there's a couple in Essequibo. But then you don't know if they were connected and then they divided. We'd have to do DNA to see.
Exactly.
There's so much intricacies because my grandmother, she's a Rose, but she was married to Johnson. So on her side, their family are Roses and Canterburys, right? So there's that relationship there, and there's a whole bunch of family I got from Berbice. So when we go to family reunion, you gotta really just smile and wave because because the family so
you can't
big
check
and
anybody
thick.
out.
And people coming and talking to you, they know you, but you don't know them. I can't remember them. So it's a dangerous space to be a Guyanese.
We have similar thing too in the Barbies River. I know with the Lindies, there's probably about 4 different Lindies that along the Barbies River, and there are some that folks say yes, you're not related. So there's still things that we're exploring there. Grimmons, right? I mean, you see sets of Grimmons that you cannot necessarily connect. A little bit on the left side. On my mom's side, Swarvin and Koshas, a lot of that also, and they're not always, they're not always related, or at least. But again, it's hard to say but here's where DNA can certainly help.
Well, that was the other thing too. Like my great grandmother, so she only gave birth to one child. There was a whole little scandal back then. She was a school teacher. She was not quite married, I don't think, to the headmaster, and got pregnant. And her father was the captain in the village, so of course you can't have that shame. So she went to Suriname to study, gave birth in Suriname, and then came back to Guyana after studying, then went back and adopted her own daughter. So then the other children in the house that she grew up, all of them had different last names. So of course I'm looking, this one is Paul, this one is Bess, this one is... So they weren't really that she'd given birth to them, but she grew them up as her own children, but everybody had different last names. So that was a confusing thing until I finally got it sorted out.
So did they themselves understand what was happening? They who were living in that?
Yeah, well, to them it was normal. But of course, this is way back then. So
my cousin's cousin is not my cousin.
There you go.
All these different phrases and terms. Okay, guys, we've come close to the end. Thank you once again for your willingness to sit, take some time out of your own schedule, your own time to sit with us. We will continue this journey. You can join us again next Monday. We'll be following Morty as he delves deeper. We'll be following Jackie. I had done an extensive interview with Jackie sometime back, and that is what we've been playing. And we'll get some more notes from the young man who came in just as the bell was about to ring.
Yes. I'll definitely do my best to be in a better place today. But I tuned in and you guys had a great show.
Jackie, someone is saying that what about Smartt? But they're correct. Yes. All right, Percy. Jackie says you're correct.
Yeah. So mine were, originally from Lancaster, but they buried in Alness, and who wasn't in Manchester. So yeah, all the way along there.
So are you creating a family tree?
It's right there.
Right there.
No, she has a family tree, and she has the unique thing about Jackie. She has a Guyanese family tree, she has a Jamaican family tree, and a Barbadian family tree. They're all part of our roots. So I know what kind of tree she's gonna eventually call it, right?
That's the tree.
That's how it goes, man. That's really dope. I don't even know where to begin, but
You start with your own group and then move on from there. Get to the grandparents, great grandparents, and you keep on going. Just keep asking questions.
Just start. That's the best. Just start.
That's the best advice.
And if the interest is there, you'll keep building. I guarantee
right.
But talk to all the older folks. Don't let them no longer be here, and then you're like, oh, I should have talked to them.
Right. So please listen to Jackie's advice, folks. It's good. It's good. You're gonna encounter some roadblocks. You might encounter some things that hurt your ears a little, but it's always good to know your family history, your bloodline. All right. As Morty says, in some instances, go get a DNA scan. Follow that. All right, and keep it as here as we continue to look down on the Guyanese and West Indian family tree. Eventually, I'm sure you'll see how closely knit we are and how connected we are. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Marty, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say I did put my contact in the chat, but if anyone would like to reach out to me for advice or know how to do this, you're welcome to contact me on WhatsApp. My number is 678-221-4060. I'm in Atlanta area, so yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, repeat the number and
so again, Marty Lindie, and my number is 678-221-4060, and reach out to me for help any way I can. I'm really enthusiastic about this and willing to help anyone that wants to go down this journey.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, all. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Marty, for joining. And thank you, guys. The chat was lively this evening. Thank you so much for the comments. It was good being here. And we'll see you guys again on Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all. Take care now.
Right.